This is all the Kings men after Game 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, with the LA Kings leading the series 2-0. I am Zach Dooley. I am not Jesse Cohen, as you can tell by my non-sultry voice. As many of you know, Jesse Cohen recently diagnosed with lymphoma, as he's been very public about. He is in chemotherapy this morning. We are wishing him all the best here in El Segundo. Filling in as best we can, I am joined by LA Kings radio play-by-play voice, Josh Schaefer. Josh, how you doing this morning?
I am doing outstanding, Zach. Thank you.
And LA Kings director of Offsides Challenges, Jack Jablonski. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm best known for my offsides abilities and other things as well, but I am great.
So Josh and I will be talking about the game, Jack. If we think about offsides, we'll
tap
loop
you in for a couple offsides. Yeah.
But before we get going, we're all thinking of Jesse, wishing him all the best this morning for sure. All is going to go well, and if all goes well, he'll be back hosting the podcast again for Game 3.
Absolutely.
Yeah, been great to have him back in the building hosting Kings Live in person, taking your calls as well, and a couple of, I guess, it sounds like record-setting Kings Talk post-game shows in terms of callers for Jesse recently.
20-plus calls, Game 1 and Game 2.
Wow, that's massive, so hopefully he can get back in here soon.
Yeah, it's great to have him back. Obviously, Zach, you and I sit next to him during the game, so of course we love the entertainment and the energy that Jesse brings up to the broadcast booth. But most importantly, wishing him well as he takes on chemotherapy here.
100%. But great showing from Kings fans in the building and on Kings Talk, so that was great to see. Josh, I'll start with you. Game 2, a 6-2 victory, for the LA Kings. It felt a lot like Game 1 for a lot of that game until it didn't. What were your takeaways from a big win that kind of maintains home ice for the Kings going forward?
It really felt like Game 1 for I think about half the game. To the point where even you and I talked about it in the first intermission, and Daryl Evans and I had talked about it on the air as well. The first, the Kings scored early in Game 1. They scored less than 3 minutes in, sure. But at least at 5-on-5, there was still that feeling out period between the two teams. And eventually the pace picked up. But still, there was a lot between the blue lines. And there was a lot of that in Game 2 as well. It felt like a Game 1 for the first 7-8 minutes of the game until the Kings got a power play and they scored immediately. So, I think that really helped it feel like Game 1 quite a bit as well. And for me, it kind of validated my feelings of how well the Kings played over the first 45, 50 minutes of Game 1, because they did the exact same thing in Game 2 until Draisaitl scores a late second period goal, and what a goal that was. And then the Arvidsson goal as well, falling over, redirected the shot in to make it a one-goal game. At that point, it was a different game because the Kings kept going. And they extended the lead rather than let it slip away. And I do agree with what some of the players like Phil Deneau and Anze Kopitar had said after Game 1. They felt like they didn't take their foot off the gas in Game 1. I agree with them, but there were things that they did not do that they normally do in the third period of Game 1. They kept doing everything perfectly in Game 2, and that led to them not just holding on to a lead, but extending it. And by the time the game ended, it was a rout.
All I hear is him talking about the beautiful Edmonton goals.
Okay.
I mean, is that what you heard? Is that what you took away from Game 1 as well, that Edmonton scored 2 nice goals?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting going into Game 2 because I thought in Game 1, of course, they dominated for 50-ish minutes of the game. In Game 2, I felt both teams had reason to be optimistic going into the second game. Of course, you have the Kings who controlled play for 50 minutes, but then Edmonton obviously got their footing and they had the momentum of scoring 4 third period goals. For me, what stood out in Game 2, like Josh said, is that they just went back to what worked, and that was dominating the play, dominating the pace of play, and further showing the narrative that this is a much different series than the previous 3.
I would agree. And
you also think the goals were nice?
No, I don't. Okay. I don't. Jack and I agree, and then you really thought that Edmonton scored 2 nice goals. Is what I saw.
They did. All of the Kings ones were better though.
There we go.
So I thought that there were, like you guys, a lot of similarities, and then to me, what flipped the script, what changed the game, was Adrian Kempe's first goal. We heard what Chris Knobloch said after the game about we don't think LA is making plays so much as we are gifting them opportunities. Mm-hmm. I think he's half right, because that was a turnover, by Victor Arvidsson after Arvidsson scored a really nice goal.
Yep.
Really
at
nice.
one end. But the Kings had to capitalize, right? Kopitar had to win the battle in the corner.
Yeah.
Kempe had to bury the shot. And Jack, I don't know how you saw that play, but it was 3-2. You felt momentum maybe turning. In game one, momentum kept turning.
Yep.
In game two, that play right there, whether you want to call it a nice play or a gift-wrapped goal, that swung momentum for me directly back to the Kings, and then they just went from there.
It very much was a, oh, here we go again type of feeling within the building, I think everywhere. You see a 3-goal lead. Of course, it was a 4-goal lead in game one, a 3-goal lead in game two. They get the late goal in the second period. So now they've got a little bit of the, all right, we've done this before feeling. Then they get the early goal with Arvidsson's tip that Josh think was beautiful. And it's 3-2, and all of a sudden everyone's like, not again. Of course, the Kings, we've seen this before, not just in game one, but in the series in previous years. And for the Kings to respond, and again, like who gets involved, it's the two most, dynamic and important players in terms of the Kings offense. Of course, what Kopitar does for the team and on both ends of the ice, but his ability to continue to produce year after year, for me, just shows, he wins. He obviously took the puck from Arvidsson, who was a gift, but then gets a pass, behind the back through two different players on the Oilers. Kempe finds himself all alone in the slot. And that shot was just dynamite. Skinner didn't move until the puck was in the net. And that just shows the continued, evolvement of how important and how good Adrian Kempe has been. I know you've obviously got a stat teed up here on how important and how dynamic he's been in the playoffs. If that right there changed everything. And all of a sudden, back to a 2-goal game, it very much felt like the Kings took control and said, not this time.
I agree, right? And, Adrian Kempe leads the NHL in scoring so far in the playoffs, 7 points from 2 games. But this isn't the first year, right? Like,
No.
He has been a guy who's elevated his game all 4 years of this series. He's got 14 goals over those 20 games, best goals per game pace in the playoffs among players with 20 games played in that time. Josh, what is it about the way that he plays that, like, he's good all the time, but this dude just takes it to another level in the playoffs?
He's just a dog. Like he just
No, I think he's a human.
Well, thank you, Zach. Yeah. No, I mean, he just
DAWG.
DAWG. Yeah. Like he's got. I think this was it the second goal last night or the first one for him where he didn't have the celebration. It was just like the stoic little snarl.
I think it was the first one.
Was it the first one? Yeah. He like had that little snarl on his face like when he scored, and he just like it was funny. I saw a tweet last night from not a hockey account. And some guy literally said, like, yo, I think this Adrian Kempe guy is a dog.
Yeah.
And, like, it's
DAWG.
funny because DAWG, and it's just like, yeah, we know this. Like, and it's funny because, Zach, you and I were talking about this in the office the other day. We were talking about how good Adrian Kempe's been in this series against the Oilers the last 3 years, despite 3 poor results for the team overall. And I said, I feel like nobody's talking about how good he's been. And you said, no, I think that's exactly what we're doing. And I said, yes, but from, like, a Pacific Division, West Coast hockey, like Kings perspective, like Oilers media, Oilers fans know how good Adrian Kempe's been too. But I think everybody else on the other side of the country and the other side of the league is now starting to realize that number 9 is so elite in the way that he plays the game. Because again, it's not just we joke Adrian Kempe defenseman with some of the defensive plays he makes and the hip checks he makes. Remember the Vetrano one? He had one, a couple of weeks ago in this season, and then he's been playing on the blue line on the 5-forward power play too. Like every asset of his game right now is peaking, in my opinion, and it's resulting in him being, right now, the most lethal player in the playoffs with 2 games.
I think he's become so well-rounded, right?
Right.
You have the ability to know that he's a trustworthy, quote-unquote, defenseman when you have the 5-man power play. You also have the Adrian Kempe who has had 40 goals in a season, 35 goals in a season. But like you said, now I think it's the exposure, right? The Kings haven't made it out of that first round in 3 years or in his career. So for him now, assuming they continue to play this well and he continues to keep that type of game within his realm, all of a sudden, like you said, I think a lot of eyes were opened at the 4 Nations with him in Sweden because he started on that third line, and then all of a sudden by the end of the tournament or the end of the 3 games that he played, he was on the first and second line. So now it's a matter of people are realizing how dynamic this guy can be, and all of a sudden he's not just going to be a that West Coast biased sleeper that no one really knows about other than people who play him every day or see him every day. Now it's going to be one of those notoriously league-wide known things that Adrian Kempe is an elite player in this league.
Dude's good.
Yeah.
Dude's good. But Jabs, I want to go.
Dog is good.
Dog is good.
Dog.
I want to go back to something that you said at the start of your first point here.
Mm-hmm.
You said the two most important players, right? You said it was Kempe, who I think was the deserved first star. But what a quiet 4-point night for Anze Kopitar, right? We're here talking about Kempe. That's the storyline everyone's going to run, and deservedly so. Kings scored 6 goals, and Anze Kopitar factored in on 4 of them. Like, it's just a marvel, what this guy continues to do, right? If Kempe is leading the league in playoff scoring so far, Kopitar is second.
Yeah.
And he's tied with Andrei Kuzmenko. So that entire line, is thriving. And, I think Kopi's season, it started off, he was the guy, right, for the first half of the year. He had kind of a dip in January.
Yep.
He was very open about that, took a
Feels
lot of ownership
feels like
for it.
we've had that narrative before. But yes, he always bounces
And he
back.
bounces back. And now, not only has he bounced back, but this is one of the highest levels I think that we've seen him at. How maybe under the radar impressive has Kopi been, over these first 2 games in getting the job done?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and I don't want this to be a one-on-one comparison, but you look at the talk and the publicity of Alex Ovechkin's notorious goal chase, but it's been identical in so many ways that Anze Kopitar quietly, he obviously doesn't have 897 goals in the regular season, but he's had the career that just has been so quiet and consistent in a lesser way because of the lack of goal scoring compared to Ovi. So for me, you look at Anze Kopitar and what he's done so consistently every year. He's led this team in scoring 15 years out of the 18 of his career. For me, he just continues to produce, and he does it quietly, right? He's not a loud, guy in the locker room, but he's a leader. He does it by example, and people have followed him. And that right there is his line mates. You look at what Kuzmenko has been able to do since he's joined the team. Obviously, Kempe has learned under his, kind of mentorship since he's, been drafted by the Kings. And for me, like you said, it's just a quiet, a nice assist here. Primary assist, all of a sudden you look on the score sheet, like you said, 4 assists or 4-point game. For me, I just look at the way that he continues to go about his business, and he's always there when it matters most.
Yeah, I think that for me, that goal that he scored the other night was such an Anze Kopitar goal. Like it was the way that he's, on the power play, he's outside, and I just remember maybe it was on Instagram where they posted like the kind of the cinematic view of it, where the camera angle's down low from that corner, and Kopi's kind of back and forth and circling, and pass the puck to the blue line, and he's involved in the play, and then Fiala gets it on the far side, and he kind of just waits and scans and waits, and then he sees Kopi just streak to the front of the net. A little bit different because this one was off the rush, but it reminded me of a goal against the Devils in the finals a handful of years ago, obviously in 2012, where he just had that exact same, lefty forward just reaches out and redirects it in off a perfect pass right in front of the net.
Yeah, and it's such a hard play to redirect on your off side because you're not on the one-timer side, and just a nice one touch. Obviously it hits the side of Skinner's skate and goes into the net, but to have that strong of a bottom hand to be able to redirect a pass that has to have so much oomph on it from Fiala to get through the seam pass across the slot through 4 or 5 sticks is a really impressive play that just again shows how talented he is. And it's not a quote unquote sexy one-timer goal like we saw Kevin Fiala, have multiple of in game 1 where he goes bar down essentially. Kopitar having that, whether it was on the ice or a foot off the ice. Again, it's just another example of what it takes for a goal like that to be scored on a guy that just, continues to produce.
Yeah, it's been nice to see that, obviously that trio on the top line and also contribute on the power play.
Yeah.
But specifically that duo of Kopitar and Kempe has just flourished since Andrei Kuzmenko arrived as well.
Oh, yeah.
And we're used to seeing that duo flourish together and take over shifts and take over games. But now I feel like we are really seeing that. And, part of that is because of Andrei Kuzmenko, I think. But another part of it, too, is I think that Kopitar makes the players around him better, and he makes Adrian Kempe a better player. He's made Andrei Kuzmenko a better player, and those three have just meshed so well.
Is Andrei Kopitar rubbing off on Brant Clark too? Because you talk about those, deflection type goals not on the one-timer side. Mm-hmm. And second straight game, the Kings open with a power play goal, but it's not those guys who actually got the scoring started. And it wasn't the same play because it wasn't, in the zone. There weren't as many sticks in front, but Brant Clark, a nice aggressive drive, and he had to kind of have that same firm bottom hand. He had to make sure the puck got off the ice. Nice play by the young fella.
Yeah, I go back to what we heard Jim Hiller say in the post game last night, and that to me was early on in the season they had to tone him back, right? You can't just jump in the rush every single time. You got to be smart when you do it. And that's exactly what Jim Hiller was talking about yesterday in terms of when is the right time to jump in the play. They go a minute and a half. The top unit goes a minute and a half. Has some good looks, doesn't score. They switch to Brant Clark. He's the one who starts the breakout, joins the rush because you realize all of a sudden there's 10, 15 seconds left in the power play. Might as well take advantage of not having an extra guy on the opposing team out there. He starts the play, realizes that all of a sudden there's space in front, and he's got a one-on-one battle with Matthias Janmark. Of course, Warren Fogle does a phenomenal job in being able to make opportunity out of nothing, on the zone entry, find space, and Clark drives the net because he sees an opening in front of the crease, and phenomenal finish by him, again, with a strong lower hand to get that shot up and over the pad of Stuart Skinner.
So good, too, because he's usually the last guy back, but the Kings had two defensemen on the ice there.
Yeah,
right? Drew Doughty was on the ice. So while I think you're right, like that, when Clark's 1 of 1 on the blue line, that's when he has to be held back. But when you have Doughty, Clark is almost a de facto forward in that situation, right? And he's able to make that aggressive read. So I saw some people online talking about how they thought that Hiller's comment was a slight against Clark. I didn't think so at all. I thought it was like he did exactly what they told him to do, right? They had the support in Doughty.
Yep.
He was designed to go there, and he went to where he was supposed to go. It was a compliment, I felt, to how Clark has kind of evolved and, played that role on that play.
Yeah, and for me, it's nice, not just for him, but also for the Kings' power play. They showed that they can now score in different ways in this series against the Oilers, because it was very different from pretty much every other power play goal they've scored in this series, where they took that last-ditch effort within the waning seconds of that penalty to go to the net, to have Brant Clark drive the net. And you're right, he saw that there was space. And you know what I liked about it was later in the game, I can't remember if it was on the power play or not, but later in the game, you notice Kings are pushing. It's in the third period. They have the lead. At this point, it kind of felt like the game was over. And he's right back, but he's between the circles, like trying to receive a pass too, and he stayed there for a little bit. And again, you had the other defenseman who was up top at the time.
To be fair, that was when Quentin Byfield took that hit.
Yeah,
and he was in Byfield's role.
Yeah, and he stepped into Byfield's
there he is,
role,
playing the bumper.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and it's been really nice because, kind of as you guys had alluded to, there were some games earlier this season where he was out of the lineup as a healthy scratch, and it took some time for him to get back into the lineup, and I think maybe recommit to the way that they wanted him to play, and he's flourished. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, listen, he had an up and down regular season, right?
Yep.
He gets into the lineup, he starts playing every day, and then of course, like you mentioned, he was a healthy scratch for a handful of years. No question, we had the up, we had the down, and we're definitely back on the up with Brant Clark.
Yep.
Game gets harder, man, right? Like the game gets harder around that December-January turn, and most young players have a dip at some point, and I think it's more about the way, like Alex Laferriere got scratched last year, right? And you saw him bounce back. I thought Brant Clark, trade deadline on, responded excellently.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing shaking that kid's confidence.
No, he's
whatsoever.
definitely someone who
you could
believes.
sit him for 60 games and he would come back and feel like he's ready to take over. That's what makes him special, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason he was drafted 8th overall and has the comparisons of some of the offensive defensemen in this league. He has that belief in himself, which is what makes him so good at so many times. Of course, the consistency is what you hope to see in terms of an 82-game season or even in the playoffs. But this is an absolutely great start for for number 92 in the first 2 games of this series.
So how about a couple of guys who were less so involved in the score sheet, but I thought stepped up. And I want to highlight the Dano line because Edmonton made the first probably chess move of the series, right? They made, I'm going to say, drastic lineup changes from game 1 to game 2, right? They make 2 guys in, 2 guys out. But that's not even the story. It was that Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, game 2 on the same line. And no matter what you do, like, you're unlikely to keep them off the score sheet. They're just that good. We saw how, Connor McDavid's game 1 was exemplary. The Kings still got the job done. You put them on the same line in LA, and I don't think the Kings chased the matchup, but they certainly leaned into it more in game 2 than game 1. And it was mostly the Dano line up front, the Anderson-Doughty pairing in the back, and whoever wants to take this, or both of you, like, just what does it say about the job that kind of those 5 guys together did to handle it as well as they did?
Well, I go to one thing that you said there, and you say it's extremely hard to keep them off the scoreboard, right? That line and that D pair did keep Connor McDavid off the scoreboard in game 2. So that talks about the impact that they have, and like you said, we saw a 2-goal game from Philippe Danault in game 1. Of course, the phenomenal game winner that he absolutely crushed. Then you go to game 2, and it's all about the defense, right? They keep Connor McDavid, and of course Leon Draisaitl has a great tip in that Josh thought was a beautiful goal. And you go to what they were able to accomplish in being able to keep them silenced for the most part, and then allow the other matchups within the Kings lineup. And of course they converted on the power play a handful of times in game 2 as well. But anytime that you can go even or even +1 or +2 against that line, it just gives you such an advantage the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think, and it's credit to that group, but also I think the Kings just feel so confident down the middle and with the depth that they have with their forward group, specifically the top 3 lines, because for me right now, they can throw out any of those top 3 lines against that 97-29 duo and expect results, or lack thereof for the Oilers at this point because of how deep they've become. And really, for me, that line was good in game 1. Obviously, they came up with the game winner in the final seconds. But in game 2, you don't necessarily slow those guys down, right? For me, that doesn't happen. It's if you can keep them relatively quiet, great. And they kept McDavid quiet because McDavid, as we saw in game 1, almost single-handedly willed the Oilers to a win. And in game 2, it was about weathering the storm. And Brant Clark said that early in the game too, as they continue to weather the storm. And I think that line came up huge. They were the heroes in game 1. In game 2, they were the definition of weathering the storm and allowing everybody else around them to contribute offensively.
It wasn't like the puck was always, it wasn't like those guys were playing a ton of defense, right? 97-29. They had the puck.
Yeah.
And they played in the offensive zone. The one goal that they got didn't come against the Danault line. But when you go to Edmonton for game 3, it's going to get a lot harder because the Kings do not dictate the matchup. It'll be interesting to see. I think the next chess move will also come from Edmonton, right? They're the team down 0-2. Do they split those guys back up? Do they keep them together? Do they make other moves? The ball's kind of in their court in terms of what's the next move. I think the Kings will be less reactionary than the Oilers will because they're up 2-0, and like Josh said, they do trust all 3 of those centers. But when Edmonton controls the matchup, those guys aren't going to go scoreless, right, the rest of the series. It's not you can shut them down. They're just too good. You can play perfectly, and they can still beat you, and that's the scary part. How much harder is this going to get, for the Kings starting in Game 3? Because I think there's all these highs right now, and that's incredible because they should be. But you can't get too high because the job is not even close to done, and the job's about to get a lot harder.
No, the interesting thing is there's so much confidence and hype around the Kings right now, but like you said, this is when the series really starts for the Kings because of course the Kings are up 2-0, but guess what? All the Kings have done so far is hold serve, right?
Exactly.
You've only won the games you're supposed to win, and that's on home ice. Not only that, but the narrative of the Kings being at home having the best record in the NHL throughout the regular season on home ice. Guess what? That hasn't been the narrative when they've been on the road. We've struggled to produce offense on the road. We've struggled to frankly win games against really good teams on the road. So now you go to an Edmonton place where, of course, the good news is we've had success in that building in the postseason. They've won 3 games in overtime. I think, the home team has actually lost more games than have
Kings
won. So
before this year had won more games in Edmonton than LA.
Exactly.
Over the 3 years.
So that's the good news. You can go into this building thinking knowing that you've had success and that you've done it before, but you're going up against a desperate Edmonton team who obviously needs to win Game 3, and on top of that, you've kicked their butt. So now everything has been in your favor. This is when it gets tough. You need to try to take advantage of a team that's down when they are down. And now the Kings, with having done what they are supposed to do and what they needed to do, they've got an opportunity here to really take advantage.
There's a quote that Jim Hiller gave after the game where he was kind of asked about that notion. And he said that we kind of play, in his words, we kind of play a road style of game anyway, which is interesting because the Kings have been so good at home.
Yeah.
And they've struggled at times on the road. But I understand what he's saying. Like, the way the Kings play, it's not this high-flying game. It is a game that should be successful on the road, right? So, like, how do you, and it's maybe not answerable, like, how do you just take the way that the Kings have played at home and just carry that into into an away building in Game 3?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer it, I think, by kind of asking maybe a different, rhetorical question, which is, I wonder how many liberties the Oilers are willing to take in games 3 and 4 down in the series 2-0. Like, real quick as an example, like the second Kempe goal in game 2 in the third period, that was a result, at least in my opinion, of the Oilers taking a liberty, pressing a little bit more, down by a few goals. Kempe just chips it up the wall, and suddenly the Kings have a 2-on-1. I mean, they had multiple rush chances late in the third period because the Oilers were pressing a little bit. Now, I hate the term, like, cheating the game a little bit, trying to get those opportunities, because I don't think that's necessarily what they're doing, but they're taking those liberties, they're taking those risks to have more players kind of crashing the net, and it resulted in the Kings scoring some goals. So how many liberties are they willing to take? Are they going to keep 29 and 97 on the same line? Are they going to try to play a little bit after the whistles, as the Kings have made a point to not do that in this series? Are they going to crash the net more than they had before? And for me, to answer your question, Zach, Kings just got to keep true. I think keep playing the exact same way you're playing. Let the Oilers make the next chess move, like you said. I think they're going to. I think they have to make that next move. So let Chris Knoblauch and the Oilers do whatever they need to do. I think the Kings need to be confident in their game, but they also need to be vigilant at the same time because, on paper, with the way that the series has gone, you would have to expect the Oilers to come out hard in Game 3. I would expect the Oilers to, at least in their minds, have the edge going home in Game 3, a building where they've been good all year, in front of a fan base that is going to absolutely have the building rocking, and they are absolutely and should be confident against the Kings as well, because I'm sure they were coming into this series. So I think if the Kings just play the exact same way that they have in the last couple games, don't try to get too fancy. Don't try to overcommit. Play between the whistles. Everything that this coaching staff has been preaching to the players and also kind of relaying to us and the media these last couple of days, for me, that's what you should expect from the Kings in Game 3. And if things don't go to plan, all right, let's see what happens in Game 4. Like, mix it up a little bit. But I think the Kings should be confident with where they're at right now, but also don't sleep on the two best players in the world and all of the supporting cast around them that has proven that they can score goals and cause problems for teams as well.
I think for me, you talk about liberties, and I almost look at it from an Edmonton perspective on not taking any liberties, because the Kings have continued to show that whenever the Edmonton Oilers have taken a chance and given the Kings an opportunity, they have taken advantage.
Yeah, that's true too.
Every time that they've pinched 2-on-1, how many times have we shown, the ability to score on a 2-on-1, or the ability, the backdoor one-timers on 2-on-1s, or the shot that Adrian Kempe pulled out of his, tricks for that second goal of the game for himself. Edmonton almost has to, in my opinion, say, we need to shut this down to just not give the Kings any opportunities. if they can, Edmonton has shown the inability to be able to hold on to the puck or make the right play under pressure in their zone so many times. To me, that's the area where the Kings should say, we're going to press you, we're going to continue it. And Edmonton almost has to say, we want to dumb this game down, almost to what we're known as Kings hockey on playing low scoring, don't give you any chances, and then see if Edmonton can almost essentially have one of their great players make an outstanding play that's just one of those, well, that's what they do type of goals. And so it'll be interesting to see, like you said, what Edmonton tries to do. Dooley, you said, it's their job to make the next move, because clearly the narrative and the game style that's being played, we've shown we can score 6 goals. And of course, Edmonton has given us opportunities that we necessarily didn't deserve. They just said, here's the puck. But at the same time, it's become evident that what we struggled at in the past few years is no longer a struggle for us right now.
And if you talk about, use the word liberty, I would probably say risks. But I know what you're saying. It's game flow dictated, right? It's not like the Oilers came out 0-0 and took those risks.
No,
but the Kings
right.
have punched first in each of these games. They faced a lot of adversity in game 1. They came through it, but they haven't been the team that's taken the first punch yet. So how does a team like Edmonton, which does have a lot of firepower, but also a lot of responsible players, give them their credit there, if they can punch first, or if they can at some point surge ahead, how does their game change? How does the Kings game change? Because I think the Kings are certainly a team that is built to play with the lead.
Yep.
They've gotten that lead both games, and it's really settled them in once they've gotten that early lead. They've taken these games over in the second period specifically. It's unlikely they're going to score the first goal every single night. It'd be nice. Really cool if they did. But at some point, they're going to have to punch back. And that will be interesting to me to see, how does that dictate kind of the play style of whatever game that is.
Yeah, that's a great point. The Kings, frankly, have not trailed in a game in 3 weeks. They're used to playing in front. They're comfortable playing in front. Are the Kings uncomfortable when they're trailing against a team that, of course, has a ton of offensive firepower? Do the Kings feel that they need to take chances or have to take those liberties that Josh was referencing that Edmonton had to take in Game 2 or even Game 1, obviously, in the third period as well? So that's a narrative we don't know. Of course, it will be tested. Will it be tested in Game 3? Hopefully not. Of course, I'd love to be up 2-3-0 again. But, of course, they're going to face the adversity at some point. You hope the adversity is just being down 1 goal, right? Of course, you want to be able to be confident that you can stick to your game plan going into the game. Will that happen? Of course, we're going to find out, but that's a great point, Dooley, in terms of we have dictated the play, we have dictated the score, we have dictated the scenario of the game. We haven't had to change what we're doing yet. What will happen when we do? That's going to be a very telling sign towards how good this team can be in this run.
It's adversity that the Kings haven't faced yet in this postseason. So, it'll be interesting. They have had some games at Crypto.com Arena this season, games that felt like playoff games. You look back to the Florida game in January, and of course the Oilers game in December, the Flyers game where they were down by a few goals in the third period. They have third period comebacks this year. The most notable ones have been all at home with the big crowds. The place was going nuts. Some important goals during that stretch. But in the playoffs, it's only been 2 games. It's a small sample size, but we haven't seen that yet. And at some point, it's going to happen where the Kings are trailing in a game, either early or late or whenever it might be. And for me, I think with the way that the Kings have played these first 2 games, I think they should be confident in their abilities to come back. And right now, I think the Oilers are probably excited to get home too. So the series shifts, right? So I think it's certainly interesting to see what we get in Game 3. My opinion on each game has changed quite a bit going in and then after each game. I thought Game 1 was very important for the Kings going into the series. After that game, I thought Game 2, or even before Game 1, I thought Game 2 was going to be very important for the Oilers. And now, obviously Game 3 is important for the Oilers, but I think it's just as important for the Kings, because I feel like if the Oilers get any life, now you're starting to question, what we've seen a little bit. So it changes every game for me, and I think this is going to be a huge one for both sides, obviously.
I'm going to kick you guys each 2 questions. First one, last thing we'll talk about with Game 2. player we haven't talked about yet, who you thought was an underrated, X Factor type player in the Game 2 win. Start with Josh.
So, I don't know if this is an underrated player, but I want to talk about an underrated play. I'm going to throw out Andrei Kuzmenko.
Could be a play.
So Andrei Kuzmenko, obviously, we've been talking about him a lot, but surprisingly not very much on the show.
Zach says, talk about a player we haven't talked about yet, Josh. Well, we've talked about this player a lot.
Well, in general, but not on this show.
Touche.
Andrei Kuzmenko, the Kings have made a point, and they have said it multiple times to the media, play between the whistles, right? Because we don't want to give them any opportunities to have free power plays, right? Kings are on a power play in Game 2 of in the second period of Game 2, and a top unit's out, and they create a chance, and it ends up with this scrum in the trapezoid right behind the net. I think Byfield gets knocked onto the back of the net. Kuzmenko gets latched onto, and after the scrum kind of parts, Kuzmenko's like having words with somebody and is skating after like one of the Oilers players. Linesman has to separate him, and immediately afterward, Adrian Kempe, at least to me, it looks like he goes up to Kuzmenko and says something, whether it's calm down, like we're fine, let's go, power play, whatever. But he goes up to him, kind of calms everything, and off the next faceoff, Andrei Kuzmenko scores a massive goal, what turns out to be the game winner for the Kings. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is such a massive point in that game the other night, and maybe carries over to that Oilers goal from Arvidsson that the Kings just continued to build on it after that. That goal did not faze them at all, and I think that was such a massive moment in the game for me. Yes, that Kempe goal, the second one, or the first one that made it 4-2, to me in that moment, it felt like the game was over. It felt like Kings are not doing this again.
Yeah.
Like, they're wrapping this up. Mm-hmm. But that moment with Kuzmenko, to me, showed this is a different Kings team than we've seen in the past. It is a more composed Kings team than we've seen in the past. They're not going to take these or give away these cheapos, these cheap power play opportunities for the Oilers that they have in the past, and the Oilers have absolutely punished them for it. It's been 2 games. Mm-hmm. Things can change, but at least through 2 games going into Game 3, the Kings, like I said before, should be confident with what they've had, and I think that little moment in the game, for me, has kind of been a microcosm of what we've seen in these first 2 games of the series for the Kings.
Okay, so Josh didn't fully answer your question because
Andrei Kuzmenko.
Yeah. I will happily do it. I want to talk about 2 players, and it's Vladislav Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson. I think you and I, obviously, we sit up next to each other during the game while Josh, talks to people on the radio.
I talk at them. They don't talk back.
That's true. That's a good point.
Daryl does.
He doesn't even listen.
But you and I have talked so many times about, not only throughout this year, but of course in the first 2 games of this series, how anticipatory and how active the Kings have been in the defensive zone with their stick play. I think those are the 2 guys that have led the way in that department. The amount of times that they have, broken up a seam pass, but I go back to those, the previous, 3 times we've played in the postseason. How many times have we seen those backdoor seam pass goals or those, tic-tac-toe plays that end up on Leon Draisaitl's stick for a one-timer? Of course, he picked up a tip-in goal, which was a great, play that Josh thought was awesome, well documented at this point. But for me, those 2 defensemen have been so active in the defensive zone, but also just, clogging the neutral zone, not allowing the Oilers to be able to enter the zone cleanly. That, to me, has been such a difference maker in this playoff series so far that I think the more that those 2 can kind of get their roses for the difference that they have been able to make has made this series so much more difficult for the Oilers to gain that momentum in the King zone.
So I'm glad you went that way because I kept looking at the top 4, and they're not structured necessarily as a top 4 that way, but the veteran 4, Anderson, Doughty, Gavrikov, Edmondson. And I was like, well, I kind of want to talk about Gavrikov because I thought he disrupted so many plays with his defensive stick. But then you're like, well, man, like Joel Edmondson had a great game.
Yeah.
As well. I thought he had a really good game. Jim Hiller really liked his game. I thought Edmonton also good in Game 1. But then you're like, but man, like Anderson, Doughty, you hardly noticed them, and they played against, McDavid, Draisaitl most of the night, and like what better compliment could you give then you didn't notice the guys playing against those two players. So it's like, I thought all four of those guys all stepped up. Gavrikov didn't even play that much. He was under 18 minutes, one of his lowest totals of the year. But I noticed his defensive stick so many times, especially in that first period, that you're like, man, this guy is making a difference. But like Joel Edmondson, like that's why he's brought in to play the way that he did. He was physical, he was tenacious, and you could just see the calming influence that he brings, when he's on the ice. But you can't talk about those two without talking about Anderson Doughty, because the job that they did was just so good. So I thought all four of those veteran D, did their job last night. It was really impressive.
I think what Jack said, like the first thing you said was the anticipatory, like the way that they've anticipated these moves. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I watched all 82 Oilers games the regular season, but we've seen like 40 head-to-head meetings between the Kings and the Oilers the last 4 seasons. So
literally,
even if you just
what are we at
37, 38, something like that. So even if you just look at the Kings versus Oilers matchups in that stretch, I don't know if we've seen Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl disrupted or lose the puck on the zone entry as many times as we've seen in the last 2 games because of plays like Gavrikov, like Anderson, like Doughty. Philip Deneau has stripped the puck away from somebody trying to enter the zone a number of times in this series already. And whether it's gaining possession of the puck or winning it back to the defenseman or stripping it away and gaining possession all of a sudden, it's not even that. It's just the defensive stick and anticipating these plays that we've seen Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl make a million times. They're going to do it, and 99% of the time they're going to be successful because they're the 2 best players in the world. But the Kings have figured out a way to disrupt those plays because of that group.
Yeah, 2 quick things there that really stick out to me in what you said there is the zone entry, right? This team is so driven on puck possession, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl's ability to take the offensive zone without having to dump and chase. And this is a team that doesn't want to dump and chase because they don't want to have to work hard in the corners and waste their energy opposed to just entering the zone with it. We've seen so many times, like you said, with Philippe Deneau and the Kings being able to break up those zone entries as they are trying to just enter it with the puck. And then the other thing is, Zach, as you mentioned there before Josh was talking there, was we don't notice, Doughty and Anderson or Gavrikov or Edmondson just making these plays. When 92 and 27 are on the ice, it's normally not good when you notice the defenseman because it's normally them doing something.
We noticed them in game 1 at times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not one guy, but those guys made their plays.
Exactly. It was like, Gavrikov got beat on McDavid's game-tying goal. Like, that's when you notice the other team's defenseman. It's when 92 and 27 quote unquote make you look stupid or whatever it is. It's just those guys being all-world players, just doing what they do against the best players against them. It doesn't matter sometimes. But for the Kings to be able to, again, silence, that offensive duo, huge credit to the 4 veteran defensemen, and then Philippe Deneau as well.
And Philippe Deneau as well. Last question before we wrap this up. Game 3 X factor for you going into Edmonton.
X factor is in player or just anything?
Player or situation or part of the game?
I'm going to just say composure. I think composure in the aspect of multiple different things. One, when they face adversity, are they going to panic? Do they get out of their systems? Do they start acting up, whatever it is? And then on top of that, it's the composure of what the Oilers have not been able to do. And that is not taking stupid penalties. We had a few stick penalties, but it's not after the whistle. You look at Evander Kane gets inserted into the lineup, instantly gets a cross-checking penalty. Of course, Jake Wallman had a stupid penalty punching Deneau in the face in Game 1. We have yet to see the Kings get out of their composure and lose themselves, giving Edmonton any type of opportunity or window with a power play.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Don't retaliate. That's kind of what Joel Edmondson said to the media the other day. It was more in the lines of Brant Clark, but he kind of talked about it in general because they were talking about we asked about Clarkie and how good he's been, but he's like, yeah, do your thing, just keep it between the whistles. Like, that's what we want to do. So I think you're right. Composure, I think, is a big thing for me. It's those shades of last year and the year before that and going to Edmonton. We know what their power play is capable of. So for me, I think it's the penalty kill. At this point, I can't believe I'm saying this. I am so confident in what the Kings power play has to offer at this point going forward. At home, on the road, I'm confident in what we've seen, not just in these first 2 games, obviously, at home, but since the trade deadline, I'm confident with what the Kings power play has to offer. For me, the biggest question going into this series was how the Kings penalty kill is going to match up with this Oilers power play that features 2 of the best scoring players we've seen in a very, very long time. So kind of going to what you said, the composure of maybe just the way that the game unfolds before and after whistles, during play, in that sense. Stay composed on the penalty kill and see those anticipatory kind of plays. Like anticipate the moves that 97 and 29 might do and stick with it on the penalty kill, because I think that has just been such a massive factor in this series, because one power play goal for Edmonton in either game 1 or 2, I think changes the course of the game, especially if they score early, because they've had power plays early in games. The Kings penalty kill's been perfect.
Yeah, no question the Kings were more confident in their special teams going into this playoff matchup than they had been prior.
Yep.
I don't think anyone saw 5-0 in favor of the Kings when it comes to power play goals.
Yeah.
So, what will happen in game 3? Does that narrative switch? Of course, you hope not. But, this has been as dominant as a first 120 minutes or frankly, as dominant as a 2 games have gone for the Kings in this, past 3+ years of playoff matchups. You've got to like where their game is at right now. Of course, everyone has a game plan or a plan until you get punched in the face. Kings have yet to be punched in the face. Hopefully that doesn't happen in Edmonton. But what will that plan be if that does happen?
Every time the Oilers go on the power play, despite the Kings being 5 or 5, 2 minutes still feels like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
It feels like they're on the ice. It's like you get 2 clears, you look up, and there's still 1:40 left.
Yeah.
And the Oilers are back in the ozone. So,
They just move so quick.
They move so quick, and they attack so quick.
And the one thing I always say I've got one thing left, but then that just reminded me. You and I have talked about this, over the last few games. The biggest difference to me so far has been the face-offs while on the penalty kill and while on the power play. The Kings have seemingly, Anze Kopitar, shout out, has won. I would love to know the numbers but I don't have it off the top of my head. Has won almost every draw on the power play. So they start with the puck in the zone, and frankly, it feels like they've won every draw on the penalty kill as well to start that puck with, start the penalty kill with a zone clearing. I think it's been insanely important for them to be able to get that extra time set up, and then all of a sudden you're not having to deal with breaking the puck in and losing 20, 30 seconds because you can't get into the zone easily.
Yeah, and overall, the Oilers were really good on in the face-off circle in game 1.
Yeah.
And in game 2, I felt like it was a huge turn for the Kings, especially in those key situations.
The key situations is
massive for the Kings in the key situations in game 2, where it kind of really negated what the Oilers could produce in the offensive zone in some of those big, danger situations.
I looked it up in that time. The Kings below 50% at even strength, closer to 60% special teams.
Huge.
Yeah.
So you're spot on. In game 1, Kings won 42% of the draws at even strength, but they went 7 of 11 on the power play, 3 of 4 shorthanded.
That's just crazy.
Game 2, they won 11 of 18 between the 2
Yeah.
special teams. So they are winning, like you said, those key draws. Even if maybe they're below 50 overall, they're winning the most important face-offs.
Yeah. When it matters
is
the
11
most.
too.
Yeah.
So that's
And the ones on the power play have led directly to goals, because you think about the 5-on-3 in game 1, which
2 seconds later
was
goal.
2 seconds later, and then this other one, I talked about the Kuzmenko goal a little while ago. The Kings won that face-off, got it up to the blue line. I don't remember if it was right away, but once they got it to the blue line, Kempe hammered that shot wide. It bounced right back out for Kuzmenko. Those offensive zone faceoffs on the power play have led to some goals directly. And on the penalty kill, I mean, I know they move fast. Sometimes you need 4 clearances in a single penalty kill against this Oilers team, because McDavid, in a blink, is back in his own zone. They have the puck, and boom, him and Bouchard are coming back up the ice. I mean, they're just so fast. But it takes multiple clearances, and the best way to do that is to start with the big face-off.
We've seen how dangerous that the Kings power play has been when they win those face-off draws right at the start. Crazily, we know Edmonton is even more dangerous when they win that face-off draw to start the power play. So it's been huge that they, 7 of 11 on or 3 of 4, I think you said, on the penalty kill on face-off draws to start game 2. more of that, please, is what I'm hoping for in Game 3 and Game 4.
For sure. And, we talked about it. Different series going up to Edmonton. As you mentioned, Jabs, series doesn't start till a team loses at home. But the Kings have certainly done their job here in LA. And whether it's the three of us or not, we hope Jesse's back to do this show after Game 3. But hopefully we're talking about the same kinds of things between Games 3 and 4. And thank you all for listening.